Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao Ias Academy's Smarter Insights into Mains Answer Writing program. And today we have some important questions from General Studies Mains Paper 3, and we'll be discussing those questions in a detailed manner. And in fact, we'll be understanding the structure, presentation, and also important content that you need to present in the answers, so that overall you'll get a picture of how to present a good answer to score a very good marks. Now the question is, examine the factors which are responsible for depleting groundwater in India. What are the steps taken by the government to mitigate such depletion of groundwater? And before addressing this question, you need to go through the model framework of this answer. Now in the introduction, you need to mention about the groundwater and statistics related to the groundwater. And you could also briefly mention about the depletion of the groundwater resources because of the unsustainable usage. And then in the body part of the answer, you need to mention two parts. One is factors which are responsible for depleting groundwater in India, as it has been asked in the question. And once you have addressed this part, and then you need to mention the government steps taken to mitigate such depletion of groundwater. And then in the conclusion of this particular answer, you need to talk about the integrated policy and community action and how they will lead to the sustainable groundwater management. And this is how you need to address this answer. Now also make sure that whatever points you write in the answer, they are specific in nature, right? So firstly, so in the introduction of this particular question, so what you have to write exactly? So as I have already told you that you need to write some important data and statistics with respect to the groundwater depletion. Now we all knew that groundwater is a very critical and a very important resource in India, because the groundwater, 62% of the irrigation is through the groundwater, and 85% of rural drinking water supply is provided through the groundwater. Nearly 45% of urban drinking requirements are also met through the groundwater. However, in recent times, there has been an unsustainable extraction of the groundwater resources. And apart from that, there are no measures for the adequate recharge of the groundwater tables, coupled with the weak governance. Now all these factors have led to the faster depletion of the existing aquifers or groundwater resources. So therefore, in this answer, firstly we need to mention about the factors which are responsible for the depletion of the groundwater resources, and what are the steps taken by the government as a mitigation factors to recharge aquifers or to prevent faster depletion of the groundwater resources. Now first look into the factors responsible for groundwater depletion. Now firstly we'll look into the agricultural drivers which are responsible for the depletion of groundwater. Firstly, over extraction of groundwater for the irrigation. Now here the agriculture actually consumes the majority share of the groundwater in India, and in fact, so agricultural irrigation uses about 85% of the total water usage, right? So agriculture itself has been consuming around 80% of the total groundwater usages. And then mostly in India, water intensive crops are being cultivated. For example, rice is a water intensive crop, sugarcane is a water intensive crop, right? So therefore, in these semi-arid regions, so mostly the water intensive crops are being cultivated. And apart from that, the government is also providing subsidized electricity and high minimum support prices to encourage farmers to over pump or over extract the groundwater resources. And then we need to talk about the inefficient irrigation practices which are existing as well. For example, in India, it is being called as the flood irrigation because the fields are flooded with the water. And this flood irrigation remains widespread. Now, when you are flooding fields with the water, you require large amounts of water. However, micro irrigation and its presence is very small scale and it is very often underutilized. So therefore, it has been leading to the more extraction or over extraction of the water resources and increased wastage of the water resources. And then we have to talk about the urbanization, industry and the land use change patterns. Now, as of now, because of the rapid urbanization and industrialization, there has been an expansion of cities and increasing presence of industries. Now, cities are also extracting the groundwater resources without any limits, and industrialization has also increased its pressure on the existing aquifers because of the exploitation of the groundwater resources. And apart from that, the loss of recharge zones as well. So why? Because in urban centers, everywhere concretization, they are being called as concrete jungles, encroachment of wetlands and destruction of water bodies. All these factors have been reducing the natural recharge capacities. And because of that particular reason, the aquifers or the groundwater tables have been depleting continuously. So that also creates the shortage of the water resources, particularly the groundwater resources, because you are extracting more water and there is no recharge of the groundwater table. So therefore, the groundwater tables have been depleting at a faster pace. And then the climatic and natural system constraints should also be discussed here. So because of climate change, what has been happening is that there is change in rainfall patterns. So we can call this as an erratic rainfall pattern. For example, if you observe monsoon, the monsoon patterns have been changing over a period of time, and there is a decreased infiltration of water, a decreased seepage of water because of concretization and encroachment of wetlands, encroachment of floodplains. Right, so higher evapotranspiration. So all these factors have been reducing the groundwater replenishment as well. Right, so apart from that, we should also talk about some geographical limitations in this. So if we talk about geographical limitations, the hard rock aquifers in peninsular part of India, so they have lower recharge rates, right? So therefore, it making them more vulnerable to the over extraction of the water resources. And then we need to talk about the governance, institutional and regulatory gaps which are responsible for the depletion of the groundwater resources. Now, in fact, in India, the electricity is highly subsidized. Highly subsidized electricity is given to the farmers. So highly subsidized electricity has been one of the leading factor for the over extraction of the existing groundwater resources. And then we need to talk about inadequate regulation of extraction. Now, in this context, many states lack stringent regulations or monitoring of the existing borewells. So therefore, the groundwater remains largely unregulated as a common property. Right, so these are the most important factors which are actually responsible for the depletion or extraction, over extraction of the groundwater resources. So let's understand what steps are taken by the government to mitigate the groundwater depletion, where you need to write a series of programs, schemes that the government has launched along with the other initiatives. So if we talk about the policy and institutional measures taken by the government to mitigate the groundwater resources. Now, in fact, Atal Bhujal Yojana, a scheme has been launched in the year 2019-20. And in fact, the Atal Bhujal Yojana scheme, it focuses on groundwater management in some priority states. Now, in fact, the Atal Bhujal Yojana also involves the community at the local level. So therefore, there will be a community involvement in the success of Atal Bhujal Yojana, and water budgeting will be prepared, and there will be a participatory monitoring of the water levels, and therefore it will help recharge the existing aquifers, increasing the groundwater table levels as well. So therefore, this is a very important scheme that the government has launched to mitigate the depletion of the groundwater resources. And then we should be talking about the Model Groundwater Sustainable Management Bill of 2017. And this model Groundwater Sustainable Management Bill 2017, it provides a basic frameworks for the states to regulate the extraction via permits, water budgeting and recharge obligations. And then we should also talk about the monitoring and mapping programs launched by the central government. There is a central groundwater board, and this central groundwater board regularly conduct aquifer mapping, right? Because it has launched a program called the National Aquifer Mapping Program, and this will inform recharge interventions that are needed to increase the levels of groundwater tables and recharge aquifers. And then we have to talk about the technical and demand management interventions to mitigate the groundwater depletion. So there is a need for promotion of micro irrigation, because what we have been doing, we have been flooding the fields with the water. Now when you flood the fields with the water, you need a large quantities of water and over extraction of the groundwater resources as well. So therefore Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, so it provides subsidies for drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation system, because when farmers are increasingly using drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation, it reduces the dependence on the groundwater resources. And then we have to talk about the rainwater harvesting and the recharge structures as well, right? So as we have just understood that the water tables have been declining at a faster pace, right? So therefore there is a need for the rainwater harvesting in urban areas. Now because of these rainwater harvesting, so the consumers can use the water, or it will also help recharge the groundwaters in the urban areas and supports check dams, recharge pits and watershed programs. So by all these interventions, so what happens is that it will help recharge the existing aquifers, right? And then we should also talk about the supply side and community centric measures. And if we talk about the supply side and community centric measures, so firstly the watershed development programs. The government has launched integrated watershed management program, and this integrated watershed management program will help restore the existing catchments, check surface runoff and also promote infiltration of the water resources. And at the same time, the large scale public awareness is also very important when it comes to the water governance, water management, recharging the groundwater aquifers. So therefore encouraging village level water supply plans, Gram Panchayat led recharge efforts under Abhay and other missions is very important, right? So in the conclusion, what you should write, so in the conclusion of this answer, groundwater depletion in India is an outcome of multiple interlinked factors. So groundwater depletion is not solely dependent on one single factor. There are a number of factors which are responsible for the groundwater depletion, and these factors are interlinked with one another. For example, from excessive agricultural extraction to inefficient irrigation to urban pressure, climate variability and even the weak governance at different levels. So all these factors are mostly responsible for the depletion of the groundwater resources at a faster pace. Well, the government has launched a variety of policy, institutional, technical and community level interventions. The challenge remains formidable, right? So therefore the success of groundwater management or sustainable groundwater management depends on enforcement of the regulations, recharge augmentation at a scale, restructuring the subsidy regime, the subsidy, electricity subsidy being given to the farmers, and widespread behavioral change. So a combination of all these factors will help in the sustainable management of the existing water resources and recharging the aquifers and increasing the levels of the groundwater tables. So this is how you have to write a holistic answer in this particular question. And then we'll be discussing another very important question, and this question is about the food processing industries in India. So examine the scope of food processing industries in India, elaborate the measures taken by the government in the food processing industries for generating employment opportunities? Again, this question has two important parts, and in the introduction of this answer, so you just simply mention the contribution made by the food processing industries to India's economy. So just mention some important and key relevant data in the introduction with respect to the food processing sector, and that will be sufficient. And in the body part of the answer, again you need to write two parts. In the first part of the answer, you just have to examine the scope of the food processing industries in India, and in the second part of the answer, you need to write the government measures. And in the conclusion, so you have to mention any way forward, any suggestions for the food processing industry to generate more employment opportunities, food processing industry to be successful or sustainable. So you have to mention all those suggestions in the conclusion of this answer. Now, as I have already told you that in the introduction, what you need to write, so India is the world's second largest producer of fruits and vegetables, and in fact India is a major producer of milk, cereals and the marine products as well. So therefore there's a huge and immense scope for or the potential for the food processing industry, food processing sector in India, because the fruits, vegetables, milk, cereals, marine products, all these things have to go through the food processing industries to increase the value of these commodities. So therefore the food processing industry actually act as a bridge between the agriculture and the industrial sector, right? Why? Because the agricultural produce, it goes through the food processing sector, and the food processing sector will add extra value to the agricultural produce, and once the value is added to the agricultural produce, the produce will go to the industries. So therefore the farmers will get a remunerative prices for their produce if the value is added to their produce. And apart from that, food processing sector is a labor intensive sector, so therefore it can create large scale employment opportunities, particularly for women in rural areas and urban areas, right? So therefore it leads to the women empowerment, financial independence of women, self-reliance of women, and it further increases the decision making power as well, right? So therefore if we talk about the food processing industry, so the food processing industry add value to the agricultural produce, it reduces the wastage, and it also generates large scale employment opportunities. So this is how you need to write the introduction for this particular question. And then you need to mention the scope of food processing industries in India. So what is the scope of food processing industries in India? So firstly, India has a vast agricultural base. It is true, because as of now 58% of India's population, so they're dependent on agriculture sector. So therefore there's a vast agricultural base, and in fact the food processing sector, it adds value and shelf life to the perishable commodities. For example, fruits, vegetables, they are perishable commodities. So the food processing sector will increase the shelf life of fruits and vegetables, and it further adds value to the perishable items. So it will help reduce the post-harvest losses. Around 92,000 crore annually post-harvest losses will be reduced. And then we need to talk about the rising demand and export potential of the agricultural produce, right? Because the changing food habits, urbanization, rising incomes of people, so this has been increasing the demand for the processed foods in India, right? So therefore the food processing sector can cater to the demands of changing food habits, increasing urbanization. And in fact, in the year 2023, so far India exported a processed food worth of $5 billion US. And then we need to talk about the employment generation aspect, because the sector is labor intensive and support both skilled and unskilled employment, right? So therefore the sector so far has been providing 1.93 jobs right? So 1.93 million people are employed in the food processing sector. So as per the Ministry of Food Processing Industries. Now, what government measures have been taken for employment generation? So firstly, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana. So this Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana provides grants for cold chains, agro-processing clusters and mega food parks. So overall, it encourages establishing the food parks. And then the production linked incentive scheme has also been launched by the government, and this production linked incentive scheme provides incentives for the foreign companies and Indian food processing companies, and incentives on increased investments and increased job creation in the food processing sector as part of the production linked incentive scheme. And then the government has also launched one district one product as well. So this one district one product program encourages the local food processing entrepreneurship based on the regional strength as well, right? So these are some essential and important schemes that the government has launched so far. And then we should be talking about other important schemes as well. Along with these schemes, there are some other important schemes which have been launched for encouraging food processing industries to create large-scale employment opportunities. For example, the skill development initiatives. There are institutions like National Institute of Food Technology and Entrepreneurship Management, right? So it actually offers training and research and development support for the young entrepreneurs. So therefore, it has been developing the skills in the food processing industry. And in the conclusion of this answer, so you just mentioned the transformative potential of the food processing industry in doubling farmers' income, because we have an ambitious goal of doubling farmers' income. And apart from that, the other important aspect about the food processing industry is that it can reduce the agriculture waste, and it could also generate mass employment opportunities, right? So it has the potential of creating employment opportunities. It could reduce the agricultural waste, and at the same time it could also double the farmers' income, because the farmers will get remunerative prices for their produce. Now in this context, the strategic policy support and private sector participation can actually unlock its full potential, the food processing sector's full potential. So that's how, in an optimistic manner, you need to write the conclusion for this answer. And next question, how does nanotechnology offer significant advancements in the field of agriculture, and how can this technology help to uplift socio-economic status of farmers, right? So this question is about nanotechnology, and nanotechnology as a theme is very important for mains examination. Like nanotechnology theme has been repeated like almost every year in the mains examination. Now in the introduction, you need to briefly talk about the nanotechnology, and in fact how nanotechnology offers innovative solutions to enhance the agricultural productivity and sustainability. And in the body part of the answer, you need to address two parts. Firstly, how nanotechnology offer advancements in the field of agriculture, and then in the second part of the answer, how nanotechnology help uplift socio-economic status of farmers. So it is important to write answers to these two parts. And in the conclusion, what you need to write? So conclusion, so you need to write about linking nanotechnology with doubling farmers' income. So linking nanotechnology with the sustainable agriculture, so that the socio-economic status of farmers can be substantially improved, right? So in the introduction of this particular question, you just have to briefly introduce about the nanotechnology, right? So nanotechnology is just a manipulation of atomic or molecular scale, right? Manipulation of matter at this scale, either atomic or molecular scale, which means 1 to 100 nanometers, right? So in fact, nanotechnology has been revolutionizing various sectors, including the agriculture sector as well. So that means nanotechnology has the potential to revolutionize the agriculture sector as well, because nanotechnology offers innovative solutions to age-old problems like if you're facing low productivity, high input costs, inefficient resource use. So therefore, as we have just discussed, that 58% of the people are still dependent on the agriculture sector. And even though 58% of the people are still dependent on the agriculture sector, so there is a very high BPL population within the agriculture sector. And in fact, agriculture sector has also been facing various other issues: low productivity, higher input costs, post-harvest losses, inefficient resource usage, right? So increased use of fertilizer, pesticides. So there are a lot of problems which have been plaguing the existing agriculture sector. So however, nanotechnology can offer sustainable solutions to address the existing problems in the agriculture sector. So let's understand this, how advancements of nanotechnology in agriculture will help deal with all these important issues. So firstly, nano fertilizers and nano pesticides. So it enhances nutrient use efficiency and reduces the environmental pollution, right? So in fact, if we talk about the environmental pollution, if we use excess fertilizers and pesticides, it will lead to the environmental pollution, the pollution of water resources, pollution of the soil resources, right? But nano fertilizers can help increase the nutrient use efficiency. As per Indian Council of Agricultural Research, so it has recently developed nano urea, and this nano urea has 80% lesser quantity than the conventional urea, but it is more efficient when it comes to the nutrient usage. And then we need to talk about the precision farming as a method. So if we talk about the precision farming as a method, use of nanosensors for real-time monitoring of soil health, moisture content, and the pest activity. So if we are able to monitor the soil health, moisture, and pest activity, it will help come up with targeted interventions and reducing the input costs as well. Now, reducing input costs means that, or it translates to increasing profitability of the farmers on their produce. And then we need to talk about the post-harvest management, because nano coatings on produce to extend the shelf life of the agricultural produce, and even nano packaging of materials, it can offer better barriers properties to prevent the spoilage of the agricultural produce. And apart from that, we should also talk about the water management as well, because the nano enabled hydrogels, they can improve the soil water retention in arid regions, and they will further help boost the agricultural yields as well, so that we can also deal with the lower productivity of the agriculture sector. And then we should also talk about the other aspects of it as well. Now if we talk about the other benefits of the nanotechnology within the agriculture sector, so it will help upliftment of the farmers, right? So socio-economic upliftment of the farmers, because it increases the income through higher yields. So as of now in Indian agriculture, productivity is also another major problem. Now efficient inputs reduces cost and improves productivity, so thereby enhancing the profit margins firstly. Secondly, its reduction in the post-harvest losses, for example value addition, longer shelf life, so they can lead to the better market access and better prices. And then it also creates large-scale employment opportunities for India's youth, particularly for women, because the growth of agri-based nano industries, so it fosters the rural entrepreneurship and jobs, and it will also lead to the empowerment of women at the grassroots level. And then it can even lead to the sustainable farming, because eco-friendly practices ensure long-term agricultural availability or viability and resilience, right? So this is how the nanotechnology will help in the socio-economic uplift of the farmers as well. And in the conclusion, you just have to mention the transformative potential of the nanotechnology in Indian agriculture, because it could enhance the productivity in agriculture, and it could make agriculture more and more sustainable, and it could potentially increase the income of the farmers, help double the income of the farmers. However, the proper awareness, training, regulatory support, it can significantly uplift the socio-economic conditions of the farmers as well, and it ensures the food security for the nation as well, right? So that's how you need to address the demand of this particular question. So this is all for today, and thank you so much. So please subscribe our YouTube channel, and if you have any suggestions, please write those suggestions in the comment section, and thank you so much.